He is a solution architect talking to us about AIS's accelerated ATO and compliance solutions. Bryan?
Thanks, Karina. Appreciate it. First off, I want to thank you, Karina, and Vishwas for setting this up for us to share information about Azure government. This is my first time presenting here, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity. I've learned in the past from other events, and I'm glad to finally be able to jump in and contribute back. As Karina said, I'm a solutions architect for cloud security and compliance. I work for AIS, Applied Information Sciences. I've supported many federal clients to achieve authorizations and prepare for CCRIs or third-party assessments. Our team at AIS, the cloud security and compliance team, have supported many of their other federal clients in pursuit of an ATO or other continuous monitoring requirements. My overall goal and kind of mission is to add or improve time to value by creating repeatable, secure, and compliant cloud solutions in Azure, and specifically to remove the ATO as a blocker. So let's talk about that ATO, this authorization to operate. For some or most, this can be quite a headache, quite a challenge. It's that official management decision, typically by a senior organization official, to authorize and accept the risk of an information system. So it's required by an information system before they start to inject live data and move to production. This is typically the target for compliance and security professionals, as well as any security engineer that's working on an environment. So it's that end or milestone goal that we all strive for. The process itself is very similar to what is typically experienced for an on-premise solution. The only difference I would say is that in the cloud, you have a lot more advantages, a lot more benefits at your disposal. So looking at the overall process of the risk management framework, as most of you know, it can take quite a bit of time, sometimes over a year. So we'll have like a already developed environment that's ready to go, just waiting for authorization that can't serve any purpose. And so my job is to reduce that time and to make sure we can function. So just a brief overview of the steps here. For categorization and select, these are the first two steps of that risk management framework. These are going to be almost identical to any other RMF process, whether it's cloud or on-premise. You're categorizing the risk level of the environment and selecting the security controls that are appropriate for that environment. Step 3, that implementation step, this is where you're going to get the most benefit from any type of acceleration. This is what typically takes the longest amount of time. This is where you would answer how you're meeting certain security requirements, security controls, and what your system is doing to mitigate and remediate any risk in the environment. I personally have worked on environments for every security category, whether it's low, moderate, or high, and know what Azure is responsible for, what you as a mission owner is responsible for, and what other organizations would be responsible for. Some environments will leverage other outside resources like DISA. We had a question in the last presentation about the CAP, so DISA would provide some support there. Some organizations require a cybersecurity service provider and other organizations that you may be leveraging. And that's all really done in that third step. Step 4 is that assessment phase where after you finish step 3, you present everything to a controls assessor to go over how you're preventing risk in your environment. And then step 5, that's the golden step there. That's the target, is to get that ATO and where the authorizing official will accept the risk and allow you all to go into a production status. Because I've seen a lot of this and been a part of many different missions and either applications, information systems, I've been able to see a lot of common challenges that you may be experiencing yourselves. Most of them have to do with how long it takes. You know, it's been said in a lot of these government projects that the ATO is the long pole in the tent. It's the thing that takes the longest, is the most frustrating, but some clients, like I said before, they end up waiting months and months with a ready environment, just waiting on an authorization. So this acceleration process that we're going to talk about can be used to support a variety of environments, whether it's an enclave environment and you're setting up a landing zone for other organizations to use some common services that you set up, or you have a major or minor application that you're wanting to transfer to the cloud so you have more availability to your users. These can all benefit from the acceleration process here. So some of these at a high level solutions that I've seen reduce that time to value and improve overall compliance and security are things like templates for plans, security plans like your system security plan, contingency plan, disaster recovery, things that you will need for any environment to get an authorization. Also pre-crafted security controls responses. And really all this is done because the ATO should be working concurrently with development. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It should be something that you do together. And as you continue to develop, you know what's going to be in your environment, what you're planning to be in that environment. And so you should be able to do at least a rudimentary response to some of these security requirements. And so starting off with a baseline of templates, security controls responses, and only having to tailor those to the changes in the environment is a huge advantage to reducing that time frame. And this all really boils down to having a repeatable solution. With these compliance templates like access control policies and the other ones I talked about with configuration management as well, other resources that are available like infrastructure as code or other native Azure tools and services. They're really all used with a do once and use many time attitude. And that's the approach that we take as well. This is we really see the advantage in the documentation side and evidence gathering in an infrastructure development. If the environment baseline is going to be the same across a few projects or a lot of projects, multiple missions, why should you have to start from scratch when there's a solution available that only needs to be tailored to meet your needs? One of the biggest advantages in a cloud solution, like I said before, is that responsibility, that shared responsibility. We talked about other organizations like DISA, but the biggest advantage is going to be with Azure, with your cloud service provider. For those of you that are just starting your cloud journey or thinking about moving to the cloud, in an on-premise data center, for example, you're going to own the whole stack, be responsible for meeting all requirements. This has some advantages like control and responsibility, but the more you leverage your cloud service provider, the more you leverage Azure and Microsoft, the more you're going to get out of it. Some specific examples are going to be those physical security controls. In an on-premise environment, you've got to worry about how you're securing these bare metal devices, but in a cloud solution, you don't have to worry about that because Microsoft is going to be handling that. And this is all that shared responsibility in the cloud. And it really means two things. It's shared risk and, most importantly, faster implementation. Because Microsoft Azure has an existing authorization with most of their services up to impact level 5 and 6, it really reduces that risk that's presented. Azure services that are already authorized shouldn't have to go through an authorization process. So if you're planning on using Security Center or Sentinel or log analytics, those aren't things that you need to go through an authorization process. And like I said before, the more you leverage, the faster your implementation is going to be. So with the time it takes to procure, process, and prepare physical equipment, you're really removing a lot of that time to value, especially when you're going through a lot of government requirements on that. That's not to say there's not a procurement process still required. It's just the advantages of using this solution is much better. Other resources that are available that reduce the overhead and improve that time to value are that inheritance model. If you're using a repository like EMAS or McCast, CSAM, Exacta, there's many out there. The ability to show inheritance and present that inheritance and risk transference to an authorizing official makes things a lot more understandable and easier to accept. Now, this isn't to say that because we're using Azure, we're not responsible for anything and we're good to go. There's still some customer responsibilities, things like access control, for example, and other endpoint protection requirements. These are still going to be under the customer responsibility, and where the acceleration tools and plans, templates are really going to see a benefit for. So talking about a few of those, I know Eric in the last presentation really hit home with a lot of the blueprints talk. We're going to have a little overlap here. With Azure policies and blueprints, you're going to be able to see and set a baseline level of compliance. You set the policy that enforces the different rules across the subscription or different resource groups and management groups. These all ensure a consistent level of compliance throughout the entire environment. So the blueprints in particular, it's a design package focused on reusability, consistency, and compliance of an environment or management groups. And they're really used to define a repeatable set of Azure resources and orchestrate the deployment of various resource templates and other artifacts that can be used as evidence to support an ATO. Other services that I've seen provide significant advantage when presenting the risk are if we're able to utilize Azure Security Center or Azure Sentinel. These are very robust tools to help address a lot of security requirements by a lot of the security controls, as well as ensure that not only are you a compliant environment, but you're also a secure environment. So Azure Security Center, for example, it focuses a lot of that continuous monitoring of your resources as it relates to security. You can also map your Azure Security Center to specific NIST, like 853 controls or other frameworks, and really give you a evidence-based result on how your system is doing, so that you can provide that to any assessor that's going to be looking at your system from a compliance standpoint. And Azure Sentinel, it really builds on Security Center, and it becomes that security information and event management service across your entire environment. You can leverage Sentinel for a lot of your incident response activities, notifications, alerts. It's a very great resource to be able to use and leverage when presenting to your AO or your SCA team for review. Just to give you an example of Security Center, some of you have probably seen a dashboard very similar to this. This is how Security Center presents, gives you a compliance health of your system. It even makes recommendations on how you can mitigate certain risks that are presented. And then Azure Sentinel, this is your live monitoring. When you use the tools like Security Center and Sentinel, along with Azure policies and blueprints, you can pre-configure Azure deployments to be more compliant and secure. So as an example, if you have an impact level 5 environment, before your environment is even set up, your organization or mission owner may determine beforehand that you want to use Azure Sentinel or a slew of other tools that are available, that they'll be a key part of your environment's, in this case, incident response, but to meet other needs. At this point, walking into a security assessment, we already know the benefit of Azure Sentinel and how it can meet certain compliance requirements. So, why not start with a preset list of controls responses that are tailored to meet the requirements that are leveraging Azure Sentinel, for example. So these security controls responses, a lot of the required documentation like disaster recovery, configuration management, these can all be crafted before your first virtual machine, if that's what you're using in your environment, is even set up. So at this point, we've talked a lot about the risk management framework, Azure inheritance, services and other tools that are available that can be all used independently to provide improvements to the overall ATO process and improve that time to value. So putting it all together in a standard approach is what we do. This is our approach at AIS. This is our strategy. You all can benefit from adopting a strategy that's similar to this. You may already have certain solutions that you're looking at or approaching to meet these needs. But really, just to kind of go over it, we start off with a roadmap from the get-go before anything's set up. What are the mission requirements, and what services can be used in Azure or otherwise to meet those requirements? And starting off with a set of standardized ATO documentation and blueprints, that's where we really improve that time to value, because we know what services we want to use. If we have that baseline of documentation and controls responses, we just merely need to tailor those to meet the mission needs. The next step is going to be understanding the ATO requirements and translating what the cloud service provider, in this case Azure, is using, and what their responsibilities are and what our responsibilities are. And then developing those ATO artifacts. So the ATO artifacts and the testing and validating of security controls, if you're starting off with the same attitude that you would approach an environment with pre-developed infrastructure as code, you've got templates available and already pre-tested security controls that we can leverage to just simply tailor and update to the mission needs. And all of this is just in the main mission of reducing the time to submit to an ATO. Currently, we've seen a lot of success in a few Army organizations. One example I'll share, we developed a impact level 5 environment. This was an enclave environment, and its purpose was to serve as a application onboarding environment as well as a data hosting and analytics environment. So we developed this in impact level 5 and received an authorization for it. Now, the intent from the beginning was to have the same environment available on the secret network on IL6. And with all of the work we already did for impact level 5, we were able to essentially copy and paste it and use it as a baseline for an impact level 6. Of course, there's additional requirements when you're entering the impact level 6 environment, but to be able to start at a point that's so far ahead of a traditional start with nothing, it really improved that time to value. And it already started us off at a fairly secure point and a fairly compliant point. And we just needed to tailor it to meet the new mission needs. And as far as what I would call this would all really be kind of an ATO as a service engagement. And like I said, you may already have a solution for your ATO needs. I hope that you benefited from parts of this presentation. Some of the things that we offer are kind of a Kickstarter workshop that help with the roadmap and planning the services you want to use, as well as the requirements from the government that you need to meet. If you're already part way through this ATO process and could benefit from some consulting services, we can still improve that. Or if you're already in an existing environment, these acceleration methods can still be used in an existing environment. Every 3 years, you're going to need to go through a reaccreditation, and to improve your documentation, improve the security of your environment using these pre-crafted tools and other Azure tools that are available will not only increase compliance, but increase security. Yeah, so at this time, that's really it for my presentation. I'll
Bryan, we do have a few questions.
All right, I'm ready for some questions.
Okay, great. Do these blueprints and policies have feature parity between the different clouds, like GCC, GCC High, DoD?
That's a good question. So I know with the Security Center, there will be parity between different requirements. And with blueprints, you can use those to meet different compliance requirements depending on the framework that you're using, as well as the requirements that are met, or sorry, the requirements that are set for your organization.
Great. Next question. Due to the nature of services being provided, is Microsoft maintaining an ATO, and how are they advising customers of inheritable controls?
That's a good question. So the answer is yes, Microsoft is maintaining a provisional ATO that covers the services that they have authorized. For example, log analytics would be a very useful service in an impact level 5 environment. This is covered under an ATO that Microsoft pursued with DISA. As far as advising the customers on inheritable controls, this can be done a few ways. In my experience using EMAS, we'll create a package there that's going to serve as our repository for all of our security controls, artifacts, and other documentation. Within that service, there is developed a preset of inheritable controls, depending on your need. If you're using a PaaS environment, there's going to be a list of security controls that are available there. Or if you're using an IaaS environment, there are also going to be another set of security controls that you can inherit there. And then at that point, there's POCs listed within there that you can reach out to get like a signed memorandum of understanding or MOU or MOA, depending on what you need to ensure that those controls are not only covered by Microsoft, but that it's official.
Great. And one more question. Will this be able to replace applications like Tenable, Nessus, IBM, or Splunk security products?
That's also a very good question. I would like to see that. At this point, there are federal requirements for things like ACAS, which is a Nessus product that they set up in HPSS, but the solutions in Azure are very robust and do meet the requirements there. So a lot of it will depend on your authorizing official, how much risk or how new they want to be and want to pursue. But the tools that are offered in Azure are very powerful. At this point, we are working with the tools that are required. But again, that kind of is up to the AO to see what level of risk they want to accept.
Great. Bryan, thank you so much for your presentation today. I don't think we have any more questions at this time. That was very insightful. For those attending, there are a lot of additional resources available. If you haven't checked out our CAF, which is the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework, we also have links to fast track lift programs, Azure Academy. We do have an Azure GovCloud migration playbook, Microsoft Learn, our blog. We also house all these videos in a Azure Gov Dev video library or YouTube channel. So you have those two sources. And of course, everything related to an Azure service, it has documentation, so make sure you check that out as well. So with that, apologies for starting just a little bit early, but that means we'll let you go a little bit early. So please be sure to join us for our next Azure Gov Meetup. If you're on social, it's hashtag Azure Gov Meetup. A big thank you for those attending, and especially to our speakers tonight for great content. We're very excited to have over 120 people join us this evening, and please join us our next meetup on April 28th. So with that, join us on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn group, our YouTube channel, our blog, but definitely we'll meet again April 28th. So thank you very much and have a great night.